says, try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. And do not worry that your life is turning upside down. How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one to come? Thanks to some seminary classmates from way back, our daughter was able to see one of the last performances of the musical Hamilton in San Francisco before the coronavirus hit and theaters across the nation were shuttered. Those of you who have been to big theatrical productions like this one may have also experienced bathroom lines. You might have noticed an attendant on hand to direct people to open stalls and wipe up the water around the sink after you'd washed your hands. What if, after taking your seat in the theater, lights dim, curtains rise, you discover that the very same person who was tending your needs in the bathroom is also the star of the show, the main attraction. Shocking, right? But that's how our man Jesus rolled. The same guy who washed the feet of the disciples and served up the loaves and fishes at the holy potluck was the leader of a love revolution that would reshape the path of religious endeavors for centuries to come. Jesus was a servant leader. This is a hard concept for us to wrap our minds around because we have become so accustomed to leaders whose aim is to get rich and garner power. But Jesus showed us that there is another way. He is still showing us that there is another way.
Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 21. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability.
Unexpectedly, during a Jewish feast celebrating new life and crops by offering a gift of first fruits in gratitude and praise to God, the tables turn again. Those who were once barely able to speak coherently become eloquent messengers of inclusion. Those previously with no belief become ambassadors of faith. And those who were enslaved become leaders who would teach about God's vision of freedom for all people. This is Pentecost Sunday. We call it the birthday of the church because all of God's people from every generation that has ever been to every generation that will ever be was and is called upon to prophesy and to dream big, called upon to come up with another way. Pentecost celebrates the moment in our tradition when there were no walls of time or place, no barriers of distance or class or race that could contain the good news of God's love for all people. A moment when the disciples were driven from the safety of their places of worship and compelled to reach out to every corner of the world. On this day, in our context, can we not relate to the idea of Pentecost on a whole new level? Have not the four walls of our comfort been blown away as we have learned new ways to worship together, digitally, virtually, and at a safe distance? Through masks of love, we smile at strangers, saying with our eyes only in a language that anyone can understand, we're in this together, and we will find our way. Friends, this is our Pentecost moment. We are all concerned about what the future will hold and what it might look like, particularly for our churches. There is understandably a desire to go back to the way it was as soon as possible. But what if we aren't being called to go back, only to move forward in a whole new direction? What we know is that it will be impossible to gather as a whole community safely until there is a vaccine for COVID-19. We know that a vaccine coupled with collective immunity will come, but it is likely a year to 18 months away. And that is frustrating because we miss our church. We miss each other. And while we might be able to figure out how to gather in amended ways, without extraordinary measures, it is not plausible to worship indoors in a way where everyone can participate equally anytime soon. We could and might yet spend a lot of time and energy plotting different potential plans to reopen the church in stages and how to close it back down again if there is an outbreak of infection. I have called together an extremely competent re-entry team that is tasked with looking at this situation from every angle. Any plan will require a great deal of discernment and decision-making, and by the time those decisions are made, there will undoubtedly be a whole new set of details to consider. But remember, this is our Pentecost moment. We are even now being called upon to prophesy, to dream big, and Jesus is still with us, showing us yet another way. So here's a thought, and right now it's just that, a thought. What if, instead of giving our best energies to the endless pursuit of reopening, what if we made a choice to claim this moment, this year, this next 18 months, as a holy pause? The church has lived through these kinds of moments in the past, and it is likely to survive them again in the future, but this is our moment, and we get to decide how to make the most of it, how not to squander our time, but to take hold of its gifts and let them break us open in new ways. What if we claimed this moment as hallowed ground? In the Judeo-Christian tradition, there is a deep spiritual concept called Jubilee. Every 50 years, communities are invited to take 1 year to change the patterns of their life. All debts are forgiven. The calendar is suspended. The idea is to reset perspectives and create a more equitable playing field. What if we took seriously the idea of taking a year to connect with God, to connect with one another and not to serve the demands of corporate America? What if we committed to less consumption and made radical choices to reduce our contribution to greenhouse gas production, to amend the soil, to plant and to tend, rather than to reap and to waste? Parker Palmer says, as we do our inner work, we are not simply focusing inward on ourselves, rather we become more aware of the fabric of our connectedness with others in our families, in our workplaces, in our communities. The result is an ongoing sense of responsibility and stewardship of the people and concerns that matter to us most. What if we consciously devoted the next year to 18 months to practicing radical community making in small groups, continued deepening our commitment to shared values of hope for the future, a jubilee year, a sabbatical year? It's not a year off from church, but a year to conscientiously deepen our spiritual practices, a year to redefine the very heart of our faith and recommit to our commitment to justice. I've heard many of you say that you do not want to go back to being busy the way you were before. But friends, slowing down in any meaningful way takes practice and repetition. What if we saw these months ahead of us as an opportunity to practice the spiritual discipline of slowing and noticing and going deep together? The disciples made a commitment to a new version of society. This is our moment. May God Pentecost us into a new vision of the future. I have faith in you. I have faith in us.